In the history of football, leadership isn't just about wearing the captain's armband or barking orders from the backline. It's about commanding respect, inspiring teammates, and being the calm in chaos or the storm when needed. And when you think of defensive leadership in the modern era, two names immediately stand out: Virgil van Dijk and Sergio Ramos. On one side, you have Ramos, the fiery gladiator of Real Madrid in Spain, a man who led with emotion, aggression, and a win-at-all-costs mentality. On the other, Virgil van Dijk, the calm Dutch general who transformed Liverpool's backline with nothing more than his presence and unshakable composure. They're both Champions League winners. They've both dominated on the biggest stages, and they've both defined what it means to lead from the back. But the question is, who was the better leader? Let's break it down. Sergio Ramos began his career at Sevilla, but it didn't take long before Real Madrid saw his potential and brought him to the capital at just 19 years old. He was raw, passionate, and sometimes reckless, but even then, there was something about him. A swagger, a confidence, a refusal to back down. By the time Ramos was in his mid-20s, he had already won multiple La Liga titles and was part of the Spanish team that won Euro 2008, World Cup 2010, and Euro 2012. Playing alongside Puyol and later taking over his mantle, Ramos quickly became the emotional heart of Spain's backline. But it was at Real Madrid that he truly matured into a leader, especially after Iker Casillas left. Ramos wasn't just a defender, he was the enforcer, the motivator, the guy willing to put it all on the line. Now contrast that with Virgil van Dijk, whose path to stardom was much more unconventional. He didn't explode onto the scene at a top club. In fact, at 22, he was still playing in Scotland with Celtic. But even there, people noticed something different. He played with a calm maturity beyond his years. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was effective. His move to Southampton in 2015 raised eyebrows, but it was his record-breaking transfer to Liverpool in 2018 that changed everything. The moment Van Dijk stepped onto the pitch for the Reds, their entire backline transformed. It wasn't just his defending, it was the aura, the leadership, the calm confidence that made everyone around him better. Let's talk leadership styles. Sergio Ramos was the emotional leader. He led through passion, fire, and example. When his team needed a goal in the 93rd minute, he'd show up with a header. When the match turned into a war, he'd throw himself into every duel like it was his last. He wasn't afraid to shout, to scrap, to rally the troops. Some would call him reckless. Others would say he was fearless. He got into players' heads. He got into referees' heads. But most importantly, he made his team believe. Ramos didn't need to give speeches, he was the speech. But that fire came with a price. Over 200 yellow cards, 27 red cards, the most in La Liga history. You never knew if Ramos would be your savior or your liability. Now flip that with Virgil van Dijk, who rarely needed to raise his voice. His style was more about positioning, communication, and control. You didn't see him sliding around unnecessarily or diving into reckless challenges. His teammates say his presence alone made them feel calm and focused. Van Dijk's leadership was about trust. The midfield trusted him. The goalkeeper trusted him. And because he rarely made mistakes, they knew they could take more risks. Leadership shows itself in the big moments. Sergio Ramos' highlight reel is littered with game-winning goals in finals, iconic tackles, and clutch moments. His goal in the 93rd minute of the 2014 Champions League final against Atletico Madrid may have been the single biggest moment of his career. It wasn't just a goal, it was a declaration. Real Madrid went on to win 4-1 in extra time, and Ramos solidified himself as a legend. Then there's his role in Real Madrid's 4 Champions League wins in 5 years. He captained a team of Galacticos through one of the most dominant eras in European history. Van Dijk, on the other hand, played a central role in one of the most remarkable rebuilds in Premier League history. Before him, Liverpool were exciting but defensively shaky. After him, they became a wall. His 2018-19 season was nearly flawless, helping Liverpool to a club record 97 points in the league, only losing the title to Man City by a single point. But they bounced back. In 2019, he helped Liverpool win their first Champions League since 2005. And then, in 2020, he marshaled the team to their first Premier League title in 30 years. Van Dijk doesn't score last-minute goals. He doesn't get into brawls. But when you ask Liverpool fans what changed their club's destiny, they'll point to him. Let's be honest, stats don't always tell the full story, especially when it comes to leadership. But in the cases of Ramos and Van Dijk, the numbers do paint a powerful picture. Sergio Ramos, Real Madrid and Spain. Appearances, Real Madrid 671. Goals, 101. Yes, as a defender. Champions League titles, 4. La Liga titles, 5. Major international trophies, 2 Euros plus 1 World Cup. Red cards, club plus country 28. Yellow cards, over 260. Ramos' stats show not only longevity but ridiculous output for a defender. His goal tally alone would be impressive for a midfielder, let alone a center back. Add that to the trophies and the fact he did it all while captaining some of the most high-pressure squads in history, and the legacy starts to look untouchable. Virgil van Dijk, Liverpool and Netherlands. Appearances, Liverpool 250 plus. Goals, 20 plus. Champions League titles, 1. Premier League titles, 1. Other major trophies, UEFA Super Cup, Club World Cup, FA Cup, EFL Cup. Red cards, 1, as of 2024. Errors leading to goals, extremely rare, one of the lowest in Europe during his prime seasons. Van Dijk doesn't match Ramos in quantity, but his quality, especially during his peak from 2018 to 2020, was generational. He was named UEFA Men's Player of the Year in 2019, becoming the first defender to win the award. He even came within 7 votes of beating Messi for the Ballon d'Or. This is where leadership truly shines. Not in the stats, not in the trophies, but in how a player elevates those around them. Under Ramos, Real Madrid became a team of warriors. Whether it was galvanizing Luka Modric, pushing Benzema into a leadership role, or covering for Marcelo's frequent forward runs, Ramos was the guy who kept things together. Cristiano Ronaldo once said, "Sergio is more than a captain. He's a brother. He leads the dressing room like no other." Ramos wasn't just leading the team, he was creating a culture, one where Real Madrid believed they could win any game, even if they were losing in the 90th minute. And on the international stage, Ramos was just as impactful. With Spain, he helped fill the leadership vacuum after Puyol and Casillas stepped down. He bridged generations, staying relevant even as new talents like Busquets, Isco, and Morata came in. Liverpool's team before Van Dijk was full of talent, but their defense was a meme. They had goalkeeping errors, chaotic defending, and a lack of composure in big moments. Then came Virgil, and suddenly, players like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson flourished, knowing Van Dijk had their backs. Alisson Becker, who arrived shortly after, credits Van Dijk for making his transition easier. Even midfielders like Henderson and Fabinho played with more freedom, trusting the giant behind them. Jurgen Klopp once said, "He's the best center back in the world. Not just because he defends, because he leads. He talks, he guides, he brings calm." That's real leadership. You can't be a great leader if you only thrive when things are easy. It's how you respond to setbacks that defines your greatness. Let's be honest, Sergio Ramos has been booed, hated, and criticized more than most footballers ever will. But he always leaned into it. He didn't crumble. He grew stronger. Red card? He'd bounce back. Injury? He'd fight through it. Criticism? He'd answer with a goal in a final. Think about this. Ramos made a career of walking the edge. And somehow, he kept coming out on top. In 2020, Van Dijk suffered a horrifying ACL injury after a challenge by Jordan Pickford in the Merseyside Derby. The injury kept him out for almost a year. Some thought he might never be the same again. But what did he do? He returned in 2021, reclaimed his spot, and helped Liverpool push for a historic quadruple in the 2021-22 season, winning the FA Cup and Carabao Cup, and coming within minutes of winning the Premier League. That's not just physical recovery, that's mental resilience. That's a leader. Some things just can't be measured in stats or trophies. When Sergio Ramos stared down Diego Costa or got inside Mo Salah's head, you knew he was playing chess while others were playing checkers. When Van Dijk calmly shrugged off a 2v1 counter and still came out with the ball, you saw a player who had mastered the mental side of defending. Both men had presence, not just physically, but emotionally. Psychologically, they made opponents nervous. They made teammates brave. and they made fans believe. If you define leadership by passion, fight, emotion, and winning mentality, Sergio Ramos is your man. He bled for the badge, led with fire, and inspired Real Madrid through one of the greatest dynasties in Champions League history. He is arguably the most iconic defender of the 21st century. But if you define leadership by composure, transformation, influence, and quiet dominance, then Virgil van Dijk takes the crown. He didn't just lead Liverpool, he changed them. He turned chaos into order, doubt into belief, and mediocrity into titles. So who's the better leader? The truth is, they're two sides of the same coin. Ramos led with fire, Van Dijk led with ice, and football needed both. It's not about picking one over the other. It's about appreciating that leadership doesn't look the same on every player. In the end, greatness comes in many forms. And in the stories of Sergio Ramos and Virgil van Dijk, we see just how beautiful leadership in football can be.